Yes.
Wow.
And lots of times with mothers and daughters, there is a unspoken silence that I'm mirroring you
Mhm.
and I want to be like you and you are my role model, you are my example. For me, I realized at a young age I did not have a good role model and I did not want to mirror what I was seeing. So somewhere along the line it became we reversed roles and I
Mhm.
became my mother's mother and she became my child. And after the rape, she disappeared for 3 days. And it was just my sister and I was taking care of her, feeding her. And when my mother showed up again, it was kind of like there was nothing, everything was fine. And had gotten paid. And this again, where I was the adult, she gave me her paycheck. I went and cashed it at the local grocery store and bought groceries and brought them back. And when my sister and I got back from the grocery store, our suitcases were sitting out. So when I was 8, we were visiting my mother. I'm 11. And we were able to have a summer visit with her. And the first 2 weeks were great. And then she started drinking. And the whole visit only lasted 4.5 weeks. And in that putting our suitcases out on the street, she said to us, "It's time for you to leave." She shut the door and locked it. And my sister and I are left on the streets in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My dad is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had to figure out how in the world we were going to get home. And part of what I've realized over the years with my mom is that I was her mirror. And the more I was able to stand up, the more I was able to grow, the more I was able to say, I'm not repeating this mistake, the
Wow.
more I triggered her into realizing she could have done it and she chose not to. And
Yeah.
then it always triggered her drinkings again. So I had visited her or I would call her, and soon afterwards she started drinking again. And I realized it wasn't necessarily I was the trigger, it was her seeing that she could have done this and she did it. And so it was triggering her to revert back into hiding from the truth of what was happening in her life.
Wow. My goodness. What a story. Uh, you know, I'm thinking at some point you had to survive. Well, you survived, but at some point you realized, like you said, you were locked out and you had to find your way home, back home. And you had to go through all that. That's traumatic in itself at that age. And plus you had your sibling with you. So it wasn't just you and you had to protect your sibling, your sister. When did you realize it was also that survival mode? It was also a form of self-erasure for you. Like you were, I feel like sometimes when we go through traumatic situations, we find that ourselves like starts eroding our health and things like that, and even our mindset and or our emotions. So when did you realize that it was just totally start, erasing?
Interestingly enough, through all of this, and when we got back to Pennsylvania, um, I made a phone call, got my dad. The next day we were on an airplane. We got out of there. But when I got off the airplane, my sister is running to my dad, hugging him and everything. And I walk up very calmly and I look at my dad and I say, "We need therapy." I'm 11. This is in the 80s. I
Wow.
shouldn't know what therapy was, but I had presence of mind to know that something bad has happened. I'm not quite sure what it is,
Mm.
but we need help. So I knew right away several things. Um, I knew it wasn't my fault. So I never blamed myself for what happened, which is unusual. And then I went through a period where my teen, well, from 11 until about 13, I went through a period where God and I did not get along very well. And what I mean by that is I came back and started searching for answers. And my grandmother was raised Methodist. Her dad was a Methodist preacher. She married a Roman Catholic and converted. So I went to catechism classes. So I had a very strange mixture of religious background. So I knew enough that God could help me. And then
Mhm.
God and I started having what I consider arguments because I would argue with God over the answers that I felt I was getting to why this was happening. And ultimately, my dad, when I finally told my dad what happened, I was 12 when I told my dad what happened. My dad gave me the answer, but I didn't realize it until I was 40. And my dad, when I told him, and I have to give credit to my dad, he allowed me to speak and get everything out. He turned to me and said, "Now what?" It's a very profound question, but I did not, at my 12-year-old age, understand what he meant.
Mhm.
I thought because I knew enough about sexual trauma and rape to know that there you could prosecute. There was different things along those lines, and I knew I did that there was no evidence at this point. It was my word against everybody else's word. So I knew prosecuting wasn't the answer. I also knew that in doing so, I would irreparably damage my sister's relationship with my mother. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be a rift between my sister and my mom. So again, I'm keeping the family together. I'm working on doing that. And on top of all that, there, when I turned 40 and I realized that was the right question. However, I did not see it that way. And the reason it's the right question is okay, all this bad stuff happened to me. I understand it happened to me. Now, what am I going to do with this? When I was 40, I realized, okay, what I need to do with this is heal and help others because my story is one of when I tell it, people, number one, are shocked that my mother was the reason all of it happened. I am very thankful that it only happened once versus an ongoing. And I work with a lot of clients who have ongoing sexual trauma from different predators or the same predator. But I'm very thankful I only had the one episode. It was with three men, three Hispanic men, but at least it only happened once. And I recognize certain triggers as I aged. One of my triggers is anytime I saw three Hispanic men walking towards me, I freaked out. And over time, it's so amazing how the universe puts into your path those things that you need to recover from. And I started working in a company that was all Hispanic people. And it was a small family owned business, and I'm surrounded by Hispanic people. But I realized I can't judge a whole race based on three men. And that there are a lot of Hispanic people that are just loving and very good people. And so that was a healing process, but I had to recognize the trigger. And a lot of times, as you heal through things, other triggers pop up that you don't think anything about. I completely understood where that trigger came from. But over time, as you go and you start dealing with triggers, other triggers come up. And this is where the silence and keeping quiet causes more harm.
Wow. I'm sitting here and my my heart is just pounding. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Just to hear the ordeal, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like for you at that age and for you to hold on to the silence for so long. Wow. What was the emotional pull of holding on to secrets? Because as I'm hearing you talking, it sounds to me like you had to keep that secret for such a long time as well. Because, like I said, what now? Your dad says, "What now?" You couldn't persecute right at that point, right?
Correct.
Prosecution would be out of the window at that point. So you had to hold on to the secrets for a while. What emotional toll did that have on you that you had to carry that?
It who you authentically are from growing. It keeps who you authentically are muted. It keeps who you authentically are from being out in the world because you are hiding. You are hiding because you're in pain. And I I went to therapy. And again, this is therapy in the 80s. Okay. So very different than what it's like now. In the 80s, they did not know what to do with me.
Mm,
Okay. And my dad knew, and I told my dad while I went to therapy from the time I was 11 till I was 18. Okay. And my dad at age 12 knew the rape had occurred and knew the whole story. And I know he told the therapist. Okay. I went from seeing let's see, a counselor, a psychologist, I actually saw a whole gamut. If you had a degree in psychology, I saw you at some point in this time period. And the one thing I give my dad great credit for was they wanted to medicate me, and my dad was against it. So I'm very thankful that I was never medicated through the process. I did have a breakdown, and which is understandable. Um, because here's a really good example of why keeping the secret is very harmful. Um, I didn't want to talk to my mother, and my mother had been calling, and my sister had been talking to her. I was very clear I didn't want to talk to her. And my dad made it very clear to my sister that I wasn't supposed to, and I didn't answer the phone. And this again, phones are hanging on the walls. Okay. This is
mm,
when we were all had landlines. And I am told that there's a phone call for me, and I go to get the phone, and it's my mother. And it's my mother, and she's drunk. And she starts berating me and telling me I'm 12, telling me that the reason she and my dad divorced was because of me. The reason she drinks is because of me. The reason I was molested was because of me. It was all my fault. And I remember throwing the phone receiver across the room and screaming at the top of my lungs, "No, it's not my fault. No, it's not my fault. No, it's not my fault." Next thing I remember is my dad is holding me and he's rocking me. And he goes to lay, I think I'm falling asleep, and he goes to lay me down, and I wake up screaming, and he rocks me. So I don't know how long he sat there rocking me, but I do remember the next morning we got up and we went to the therapist office. So there is awareness there at the same time when you can't tell those secrets, partly because of shame, partly because you're trying to protect others, because I did want to protect my sister. I wasn't really trying to protect my mother. I think at the beginning I was, because I didn't, you don't want to believe that of your mother. So I think maybe I was trying to protect myself from that image.
mhm,
Um, but I definitely was trying to protect my sister. And when that episode occurred, I realized that I can't. It's it, keeping the secret is going to kill me. I started telling people. I didn't tell a lot of people. When you're 12, 13, 14, your friends, they're not the people to talk to. Um,
mhm,
and finally, when I became 16, 17, and I started dating, I would be very clear. I had one best friend at the time, and she was aware of that I had some sort of trauma, because there were certain things like if you came up and tapped me on the shoulder, I'd come around swinging. So that was a
mm.
trigger. Don't touch me.
Yeah.
So I would have to tell people, if you're facing me and you want to hug, that's fine, but do not come up behind me and tap on me or anything, because you're not going to like the response. And it's not you I'm responding to. It is a physical trigger that I have from my trauma, and I
Mhm.
don't want to hurt you. So please be understanding and compassionate
Yeah.
with me. And for the most part, I had friends that were able to understand that.
Wow. You mentioned shame, that the silence kept you for a while. You kept quiet and you kept that secret because of shame. How does shame reinforce silence, and what finally helped you start loosening its grip on that shame that you talked about?
Shame is an external force used upon you to keep you silent. Okay. It is not internal. So any shame that you feel about anything came from an external source. Somebody told you that this was shameful. Okay. So I was being told by my mother's best friend, who I was communicating with a little bit. Um, she happened to be involved in how the rape occurred as well. Um, but she's the one that told me, if you say anything, same thing is going to happen to your sister. We have
Mhm.
people everywhere who are watching you. And it just so happened that was going to school. I had switched from elementary to middle school. I was on a different bus than my sister. And there was a same car that came behind, the same van that came behind the bus every day. And your ego plays all kinds of tricks on you to reinforce
Yeah.
what other people are telling you. Found out years later, when I was in high school, that that was a teacher's aide, and that was her first job, was
Wow.
was at the school. So you know, it's
Yeah.
always a wonderful when the universe shows you how
Yeah.
your fears are unjustified. Anyway, when I realized, as I moved through that middle school period, I realized that this isn't my fault. I mean, I knew that it wasn't my fault. I knew I didn't do anything.
Mhm.
And everything my therapy and my dad was reinforcing that this wasn't my fault. I had to deal with it and I had to move forward, but this wasn't my fault. So when I realized that shame was external and not internal, in the way, and people get confused between shame and guilt. Guilt is an internal emotion. Guilt is when you know you did something wrong. And people sometimes get guilt and shame mixed up because of the legal system.
Yeah. Wow.
So I realized I was guilty of nothing, and therefore I had no shame. And when I realized that little bit, that I wasn't guilty of anything, even my negative scripts that I was telling myself, well, of course you must have done something wrong. Otherwise, this wouldn't happen. And this is where God and I would have arguments
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
and making sure that the why. I tried to understand for decades the why. And then I guess it was 2012, my mother finally passed away. And I had not been communicating with my mother for a long time. And had always been, I'm an optimistic person. I had always believed, deep down believed, that she
Mhm.
and I would reconcile. And when she passed, it was about a week later, I realized we're not going to be able to reconcile.
Wow.
And my sister asked me if I was sad that my mother passed. And I said, she was not in my life. So it wasn't that I was missing her, but I am sad that we could not reconcile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it was about a year later, I realized, oh, wait a second. Her soul is now free. And who she
Mm.
authentically is that soul, not
Mhm.
that body, not that mind, not that
Yeah.
egoic pain that she lived through. I
Mhm.
can reconcile with her.
Yeah.
So I was able to complete that healing process directly with my mom after she passed.
Wow. That's amazing that you were able to still go through the process of trying to heal or mend that brokenness even after she was no longer alive for you to be able
I
to
never
do that.
believed I was broken. See, that's the other thing is that I never believed I was broken. I was always whole. What happened was I put on a mask, I put on armor, and therefore I covered up who I authentically was. The silence, the secrets,
Mhm,
all of that covers
mhm,
up who you authentically are. And only when we take the mask and armor off, only when we let our true
yeah,
selves come through, do we realize that we were never broken. And those the little glimmers of light that was coming through, that was our pure light and our pure authenticity coming through the mask and armor,
mhm,
were who
mhm,
we authentically are. And when we stripped all that away, which is can be very difficult and is scary to take away that mask that you put on for the family because you
mhm,
want everybody to know that you're okay
right.
because you don't want them to ask you questions. I remember from the time in my teenage years, especially, I was, they would all, are you okay? Are you okay? And it's like, I'm sick and tired of you asking me if I'm okay. Obviously, I'm not okay.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
But I'm moving through what I need to move through. And as I became an adult and in my first marriage, you put on the mask to say, okay, now I'm a partner, so I can't
yeah,
feel all of this angst that's happening underneath inside of me trying to heal. And one of the things my first husband said to me, so audience, please don't ever say this to anybody. Um, he said to me at one point, it happened to you when you were 11. You should be over it by now. And
ouch.
what what people don't realize about healing, it is a lifelong process. There are still things now that come up that I think to myself, wow, I bet this is still part of that. And it's like I said, as you heal, you find other things that come up
Yeah,
that where did this come from? Where did this distrust of myself
mhm,
come from? And you have to examine, okay, is this because I didn't see what was happening with my mother? Well, yeah, of course I saw what was happening with my mother. I
yeah,
chose at the time to wear blinders because I didn't want to see my mother as an alcoholic. I didn't want to see my mother as a drug addict. I wanted to see her as my mom.
mhm. Wow, wow. I am just in awe of just your resilience. And I have to tell you that you are probably the first person that I've ever heard that said what you've been through, that you didn't see yourself as broken. I've spoken to so many people who have been through similar situations, worse situations, and they, of course, they've come out from that traumatic feeling and depression and brokenness. I mean, the word brokenness was all often used because that's how they felt. I mean, I myself have felt broken because of situations in the past. But you're the first person I've heard that says you didn't see yourself as broken, and I think that's a good perspective to share, especially for others who keep thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm so broken, I'm so broken. But you're right. I mean, to be able to take the mask off and then see yourself authentically, like, okay, this is who I am. Uh, I am me. I am whole. I am not broken. I'm not in pieces. Yeah, that situation tried to break me, but here I am. I'm not broken.
The other
So
part of
yeah,
that, the other part of that, when people, it's changing the script and the story you're telling yourself.
yeah.
So I could absolutely tell a story of brokenness, but
Hmm.
I choose to tell a story of resilience. I choose to tell a story of how I was able to rediscover who I authentically was and bring that forth and
Hmm.
use my brokenness as a
Hmm.
place to authentically connect with other people who have similar situations, who feel broken, and teach them that they're not broken. that
Mhm. Mhm.
they're whole underneath all that. They need
Yeah.
to move, take the mask off. They need to deal with those masks, the armor, the things that we are told we need to do, the perfectionism, all of that to try to make us look like we're
Yeah.
golden children and everything is okay. When the reality is we're inside, we are not.
Yeah.
And if somebody would just be kind enough to say, I see your wholeness. I don't see the brokenness in you. I see the wholeness that's trying to emerge. It
Mhm. Mhm.
changes and flips the script. And
Mhm.
it's really important that people who've had trauma, people who have experienced horrendous things and think that they're broken, that they flip that script and realize that for them to be whole, all they have to do is say it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. That's how I find myself rising because I had to tell
Exactly.
myself, yeah, that I am whole. I'm no longer broken. It's a mindset shift,
It is a
right?
huge mindset shift.
Yeah.
For most people that live in trauma and that have experienced trauma, they live from a place of fear
Yes.
because, and their ego, which is a fabulous thing when you've had trauma because it flips on and says, we're going to get you out of the situation. And its number one job is to protect you. And when you
Mhm.
are a child, you need as much ego as you can to protect you to get you out of the situations. However, the ego can only help you get out of situations that you are currently in, and then it never turns off. You have to take the responsibility and say, yes, I see three Hispanic men walking towards me. Yes, it reminds me of my childhood rape. However, I have learned since then that Hispanic men are kind, compassionate, loving people. And ego, I appreciate the warning, but I don't need to be fearful anymore and continue on. But
Yeah.
and that happens. You have to flip that script on a continuous basis so that
Mhm.
you don't allow every time I see Hispanic man, me to freak out.
Yeah. Yeah. What role did awareness play in helping you move from fear to understanding?
It is the first step into overcoming anything in life is the awareness. And that's why, although my first book was Raven Transcending Fear, which is about it's my story, how I, from a childhood into adulthood, what those steps were, how I overcame.
Mhm.
My second book, Soul Solutions for Awakening Awareness, is about how to awaken that awareness because that is the hardest thing to do. For most people, they get so bogged down by the ego. They get so
Mhm.
bogged down by the story they keep telling themselves of the trauma. I'm unworthy, that it's just repetition. And
Mhm.
it rewires your brain into believing that that is all, that's who you are. And it's not. I am not my trauma.
Right.
I came into this world and Terry Marie came into this world a whole human being who is meant to love and be loved. And I had to find my way back to that, despite the fact that whatever happens to any child that comes into this world, their purpose is to love and be loved. That's it.
Mhm.
So, in flipping the script and awakening awareness, you have to be able to look at yourself and say, you know, what responsibility do I take for my healing? That has to be the first step into moving through that awareness
Mhm.
factor because blame, we spent decades where psychology and the professionals out there said, oh, look, this was your mother's fault. Oh, look, this was your parents' fault.
Mhm.
This is from your childhood upbringing. This is from generational trauma. This is from generational poverty. The reality is, yes, you may have come from that, but
Yeah.
that is not who you're supposed to be. And that is not how you're supposed to end up. Somewhere along the way, you have to take responsibility and stand up and say, you know what? Terry Marie, yes, she had some problems, but she's going to heal
Mhm.
and she's going to be okay.
That you are. Yes, I mean, I'm sure that healing journey, though, did not happen quickly or overnight, as some people would say. Uh,
No.
that must have taken a while. Now, you talk about your books. How did writing those books become a spiritual or emotional release for you?
So I have been talking about my story um, probably since I was 19, 20 years old. And when I was 22, 23, I had been asked to speak to large groups, and I can do that. I was asked to write my story, and I said, not just no, but hell no, I was not doing it. And when I turned 50, right before I turned 50, I got pregnant with a book. And I sat down, and in 9 months, I had written the first draft. It had over 80,000 words in it, which is nowhere near what's in the book. It took me 18 months to actually edit the book. And it was a spiritual download is what it was. And as I wrote it, I realized things that I didn't realize before. Those people that came into my life as angels and then disappeared. One specific angel that I have no idea where he is. And I know he was sent by God to be an angel for my sister and I. When my sister and I first got to New Mexico, we came, when we got there, my mother had a guy named Alan. He was not much taller than her, and my mom is only like 4'10, 4'8, 4'10. So he was not much taller than her, wearing a big giant cowboy hat and cowboy boots, big giant belt buckle. And he picked us up and he took us to a very fancy restaurant. And when he left, he did something that I thought was strange. He handed me his business card.
Hmm.
Why does a grown man hand 11-year-old girl a business card? And he says to
Hmm.
me, if you need anything, you call me.
Hmm.
So when we ended up on the street and I called my dad, he said, you have a ride? Can you get it to the airport? And I immediately thought of card in a secret compartment of my suitcase so that I had it. I pulled out the business card and I called Alan and told him we needed to be at the airport by noon for the flight. He picked us up at 7:30 in the morning, took us out for breakfast, walked us onto the airplane, and I never saw him again.
Wow. Wow.
Alan was my first angel. And again, these people come in and out of your life and you don't realize. And when I wrote the book, I remembered Alan because I hadn't thought about Alan
Mhm.
for all these years because he was gone. So it's
Mhm.
those. It was a fabulous thing for me to remember to see how, despite the fact that a lot of people say they feel alone in their trauma, I never felt alone because I always knew. I argued with God. God and I argued a lot, but I saw the pattern, especially when I wrote the book. I saw the
Mm.
pattern where God showed up, an angel showed up, this person showed up. That's all those, all the miracles, all the magic, all the serendipities that come into our life as we go on the healing journey. If we don't go on the healing journey, we don't see that magic. We don't see the serendipitous moments. We don't see God's hand in our life.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad that you made that shift and now you're on this side speaking the truth and healing through awareness and for sharing that with the audience, and I really hope that your story and how you've overcome can help others to heal. What does vulnerability look like for you now? as someone who teaches others to live authentically?
For me, vulnerability is just that bold truth that we know for ourselves is the truth. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients, one of the things that I let them know, I said, that's not what you truly believe. And they look at me like, don't I know what I truly believe? And I said, you're talking from your head.
Mhm.
That's your ego talking, retelling the story. That's your ego reaffirming those
Mhm.
defense mechanisms that you've put into place that used to work, but that are now
Right.
harming you. Because if they weren't harming you, we would not be having a conversation.
Right.
So for us to be truly bold and live from an authentic place, vulnerability is how you do that. It is being truthful to yourself mostly. I'm less concerned about you being boldly truthful to others as I am to be boldly truthful to yourself.
Yeah.
If you have a deep-seated fear of whatever and you say, "Well, I'm putting boundaries in place to help me." Good. Start off with those boundaries. But at some point you have to remove those boundaries and say, "I'm okay."
Yeah, definitely. Um, the things that we tell ourselves, good or bad, it's interesting how sometimes we keep ourselves stuck because of the things we tell ourselves that instead of thinking positive, we think negative and we tell ourselves those things.
We are
Wow,
our
wow,
harshest
wow.
critics.
Yeah.
And we hold ourselves back more than anybody else does. We
Mhm.
always think that it's other people, but it's not.
Mhm.
It's always
Right.
ourselves. It's always our fear. And we can blame other people. Well, so and so told me I shouldn't do it because X,
Mhm.
Y, and Z. But the reality is your ego's telling you that person's right. And
Yeah.
therefore fear is setting in and you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. For the audience, for those who are listening, who may be carrying unresolved pain with either a parent or a family member or any situation similar to yours, what would you want them to know?
You're not broken. And that your purpose in this world is to receive and give love, period.
Mhm.
That is what your purpose is. And for you to hide your authenticity,
Yeah.
hide who you authentically are. It's not about hiding your pain because your pain comes out in other forms, whether it's
Mhm.
anger, which is the most common one, but it also can come out in sarcasm, because to me, sarcasm is a form of bullying that is acceptable in society. And you have comedians that make millions of dollars being sarcastic all the time, and it's painful for people. And so your pain is oozing through your life, even if you think it's not. And it oozes through your life. And until you decide that you are no longer going to allow that pain to affect your present, you're not allowed your past to continue to affect your present in a negative way. And for you not to love the life you're living, because that is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to
Yeah.
love this life. This is your life. This isn't the life for your spouse. This isn't the life for your kids. This isn't the life for anybody else. This is your life. You
Mhm.
are meant to be at peace. You are meant to be happy. You are meant to be loved and give love. And understand that the brokenness you feel is because of the masculine armor you wear. It's not because you are broken. You are whole underneath those masculine armor and defense mechanisms. And when you strip that all away and allow your pain to be, if you allow your pain to see the light, light heals everything. The sun heals everything. You need to allow your pain to see the light so it can be healed, and that the scarring that may occur, yes, I have scars, but they are lessening over time.
Mhm.
And that messy middle, that scabbing part, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is when they go through the healing process, there's the what I call the messy middle. When you are in pain, you wrap yourself up in your blanket and you're all cozy and you're very comfortable in your pain. This is what you know, and you get used to it. you get comfortable to being in pain. So when you start stripping off the blanket, a couple of things you don't realize. Number one, there were horns in that blanket. So when you strip off the blanket, you're now bleeding. And then in some places you have, you know, really bad growing things and bacteria, and now you have infection that has to be dealt with. Infection is those major triggers. Okay, for me, it was the Hispanic men. That was one of my infections. As you deal with it, it starts to scab over. But if you get scared and you put that blanket back on, guess what? Those thorns just now reopened all those wounds. Have to start over again.
Mm-hmm.
So peeling off the blanket and exposing the wounds to the light, exposing the pain to the light, you start the healing process.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. I like that analogy as well. That makes total sense.
It
Wow.
does. It does.
Yeah.
We get comfortable with what we're used to.
Yeah.
And any type of growth is new, and any type of growth
Mm-hmm.
can be painful, even though it's what we want. We
Yeah.
want healing. And people don't realize that the healing process means you have to process the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are sitting in pain, you're not necessarily feeling the pain. You're feeling the stories you're telling yourself. You're feeling those things that are on the surface, but you're not actually feeling the pain itself, and not feeling it because you've gotten numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've done things to numb it, whether it is um, medications or alcohol or food or workaholism. Any of those isms are ways that we deal with pain without actually dealing with pain.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and it's easy to fall back into old patterns, right? So you have to really
Absolutely.
be intentional to do the work, and like you said, to, not to be so comfortable, because you're it's like what I call seeping. You're seeping in it. It's like, and then the more you seep in it, the more you become so comfortable, and the more you want more of it. To your point, the alcohol, whatever it is, those coping mechanisms, you try to use those to kind of, you know, that's going to help, that's going to help. And instead of it helping, it makes it worse.
It's like boiling a frog.
Yeah.
You, if you put a frog in a pot of water that's room temperature, frog will
Hmm.
sit there. And if you
Oh,
turn
yeah.
it on low heat,
Yeah.
it'll still sit there and
Oh,
it
yeah.
will boil to death.
Yeah.
Be careful how long you seep.
Yeah. So true. Wow. How can, as we about to wrap up here, how can awareness becomes an act of love and not rebellion? Because as you were talking, I can see how someone could be very rebellious because of, oh, look what I've been through, and my mom wasn't there for me, or my dad wasn't there for me, or whatever, or this person was there for me. And so they rebel when they get older, right? Even for young people, sometimes they rebel and you don't know why, because they've been through this trauma situation in their past, and they kept quiet about it. We don't really know what happened. They probably didn't even get therapy for it. So in that situation, how can awareness become an act of love in families that have avoided hard truths for a generation?
When you switch the framework from the egoic mind running the show and starting to live from a place of love. So, your ego, everything you do that's from the ego's perspective is coming from a place of fear. So, when you flip the script and you say, okay, I'm going to move forward from a place of love and not out of a place of fear. To do that, it's coming from the heart place, not from the head space. So when you have a conversation with mom, okay, I've had several conversations with my mother where I was trying to be loving, and it got thrown back at me from a negativity because she was afraid.
Mm.
And I realized that My perspective and her perspective were completely different. She could not see or hear from me those
Yeah.
things that I had learned. And you have to accept that
Yeah.
you may not be able to be that person to help flick on or flip the script for those people in your family. The best you can do is walk by example.
Mhm.
So for my sister and I were extremely close when we were little. All of this happened, and over the years we got further and further apart. I keep living my life. I've written my books. Right before I released my first book, I I told you I had written it when I turned 50. She came for my 50th birthday, and I had to sit down with her and said, "I don't know what you remember from childhood. I don't know what you remember from what happened with mom. Let me tell you my story." I gave her a very condensed version, and she was open to listening to me. At that point, the reason I did that was because I didn't want the book to come out and her find out from the book. So I also had to have that conversation with my dad. My dad, since that conversation when I was 12, we have not really talked about what happened to me. And part of what I realize now is that my dad does not know who I am. And there's a part of him that doesn't want to know who I am because he is still dealing with his guilt of putting me into that situation. I understand that. I have compassion and empathy for that. But there is a part of my dad doesn't know who I am. And I have to be at peace with that aspect of it. So with my sister, she's had a spiritual awakening more recently, and we've reconnected. And she has said, "I've just watched you and I've seen how much you have changed." She read my book, and the conversation that have after she read my book, she called me in tears. "I can't believe you went through all this and I didn't know." A lot of family members do not know what you have gone through. And it took my sister reading my book to actually understand what happened to me. So we have to be open to living by example and knowing that our words are not necessarily what's going to heal somebody. They're going
Yeah.
to see how we went from living from a place of fear to thriving from a place of love. And that is what they will notice. That is when they will ask questions. And that is when you are open to then to be able to tell them how you were able to overcome.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And that's your truth and healing that you hope your story will leave behind for others. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. What Terry shared today is a reminder that silence isn't strength, it's surrender. Her story calls each of us to look at where we've been mistaken peace for avoidance and where love has been buried under guilt. Terry, you brought out so many different things, so many pointers in what you shared earlier, and it just really resonated with me. Wow. Breaking silence isn't about blame.
No.
It's about freedom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Freedom to be able to walk in our own truth, freedom to
Yeah.
be able to live from an authentic place, and freedom from the past so that we can
Mhm.
prepare and live in the present moment.
Mhm. Yep. And it's choosing to love yourself enough to tell the truth, even if your voice trembles when you're doing it, even if you're shaking
Absolutely.
while doing it. Yeah. Wow. So, Terry, thank you so much again for sharing your story today, for being with us.
You're welcome.
This is really a moving and emotional story. I mean, I'm here emotional from just hearing all of that, and it just brings a lot of memory to mind as well. Wow. So, to anyone listening, you don't have to keep carrying what hurts you in secret. You just heard Terry shared her truth and the fact that she kept the secret, and she's now free of that, or she's been free now, and she's helping others to become free, that they don't have to hold on to their traumas and think that they're broken. You're no longer broken. You're now whole. And healing is still possible. And your truth is sacred. So thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you so much, Terry, for being on Unrestrained Boldness. Thank you, audience, for listening and for watching. And Terry, how can if you mentioned, how can they reach you?
You can reach me at terrikozlowski.com is the best way. And I'm on all the social platforms under terrikozlowski.com. My book is Raven Transcending Fear and Soul Solutions for Awakening Awareness, which is the first in a 7-book series on my 7 steps on how I overcame.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. I am gonna have to get on that myself. Thank you so much, Terry. Let me stop the recording here.